In the small, sleepy town of Ridgewood, the nights were typically calm and serene. But one particular night, an eerie stillness blanketed the town, hinting at the arrival of something sinister. Emily had just moved into an old Victorian house on the outskirts of Ridgewood. The locals often whispered about the house's dark past, but she dismissed their tales as superstitions. As a writer seeking solitude, the house's isolation was perfect for her work. One moonless night, as Emily sat in her study, tapping away at her keyboard, a sudden chill ran down her spine. The room grew cold, and the lights flickered before going out completely. Emily grabbed her flashlight and decided to check the fuse box in the basement. The basement door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. As she cautiously made her way down, the air grew colder, and she felt an inexplicable sense of dread. Her flashlight beam pierced the darkness, revealing old, dusty furniture and cobwebs. At the far end of the basement, she found the fuse box. As she reached for it, a soft whisper echoed around her, making her freeze. "Emily." The voice was barely audible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response, only the oppressive silence of the basement. She quickly fixed the fuse, and the lights flickered back on. Relieved, Emily turned to leave, but stopped dead in her tracks. Standing at the foot of the stairs was a shadowy figure, its form barely discernible in the dim light. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The figure didn't move or respond. It simply stood there, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of malice. Summoning her courage, Emily stepped forward, but the figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. She raced up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut, her heart pounding in her chest. That night, as Emily lay in bed, sleep eluded her. She kept replaying the events in the basement over and over in her mind. Just as she began to drift off, the whisper returned, louder this time. "Emily!" She bolted upright, her eyes scanning the dark room. At the foot of her bed stood the shadowy figure, closer now, its eyes glowing faintly. Paralyzed with fear, she could only watch as it slowly approached her. The night's curse, it hissed, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "You cannot escape it." Emily felt a cold hand grip her ankle, and she screamed, kicking wildly. The figure vanished, and the room was silent once more. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and paranoia. Emily researched the house's history, uncovering tales of a curse that plagued its inhabitants. Each night, the shadowy figure grew bolder, its whispers more insistent. Desperate, Emily sought the help of a local historian, Mr. Thompson. He revealed that the house once belonged to a man named Elias Blackwood, who had dabbled in dark arts. After a failed ritual, he cursed the house, vowing that its inhabitants would be tormented by the spirits he had summoned. Determined to break the curse, Emily and Mr. Thompson conducted a cleansing ritual. As they chanted, the air grew heavy, and the shadowy figure appeared, more menacing than ever. The lights flickered, and the house shook as if trying to expel them. With one final incantation, a blinding light filled the room, and the figure let out a terrible scream before vanishing. The air cleared, and the oppressive presence lifted. Exhausted but relieved, Emily thanked Mr. Thompson. The nights that followed were peaceful, the whispers silenced, and the house was no longer shrouded in darkness. Emily resumed her writing, now with a new story to tell the tale of how she survived the night's curse. Emily thought the ordeal was over. For weeks, the house remained quiet, and she began to believe the curse had been lifted for good. She immersed herself in her writing, using the terrifying experience as fuel for her new horror novel. One stormy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Emily was deep in her manuscript. The rain beat against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm. She had just written a particularly chilling scene when she felt a sudden drop in temperature. The room grew cold, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Ignoring the rising sense of unease, Emily continued to type. But then, her laptop screen flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. Her heart raced as she fumbled for her flashlight, cursing under her breath. The power outage felt all too familiar. As the beam of her flashlight cut through the dark, she noticed something strange. The words she had just typed on her laptop screen were gone, replaced by a single, ominous message: "It's not over." Emily's blood ran cold. She heard a faint, familiar whisper. Emily, determined not to let fear overtake her, she grabbed her phone and called Mr. Thompson. The line was static-filled, but she managed to convey her distress. "Mr. Thompson, it's happening again. The curse, it's back. I'll be there as soon as I can," he replied, his voice crackling through the static. Minutes felt like hours as Emily waited for Mr. Thompson. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the house, and the shadowy figure reappeared, hovering at the edge of her vision. It seemed more aggressive, its form shifting and writhing. When Mr. Thompson finally arrived, they immediately set to work. They decided to perform a more powerful ritual, one that required delving deeper into the dark history of the house. As they prepared, Mr. Thompson explained, "The initial cleansing must have only weakened the curse. We need to find the source and destroy it." They scoured the house for clues, finally discovering a hidden room in the basement. The room was filled with strange artifacts and a large, ancient book, Elias Blackwood's grimoire. The air was thick with a palpable sense of evil. "This is it," Mr. Thompson said, opening the grimoire. "This book holds the key to breaking the curse." They began the ritual, reading the incantations from the grimoire. The shadowy figure appeared, furious and more tangible than before. It lashed out, sending objects flying across the room. Emily and Mr. Thompson held their ground, chanting louder, their voices steady despite the chaos around them. The room shook violently, and the figure let out a deafening scream. As they reached the final incantation, a brilliant light enveloped the room. The figure writhed and twisted, its form disintegrating in the light. With one final, agonizing scream, it vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. The house felt different, lighter, almost welcoming. Emily and Mr. Thompson collapsed, exhausted but victorious. The oppressive presence was gone for good. In the days that followed, Emily finally found peace. The house was no longer haunted, and she finished her novel, dedicating it to Mr. Thompson and the resilience of the human spirit. The book, titled The Knight's Curse, became a bestseller, captivating readers with its harrowing tale of bravery and supernatural terror. Emily remained in the house, no longer afraid of the dark. The nights were serene once more, and the whispers were forever silenced. The curse had been broken, and Ridgewood returned to its sleepy, peaceful existence, with the old Victorian house standing as a testament to the power of courage and determination.